Welcome to Pop Psych 101
where we, licensed therapist Ryan Engelstad,
and licensed psychologist Dr. Hayley Roberts
break down and analyze how mental health is represented in movies, shows, books, and across the pop culture and social media landscape.
We will determine what lines up with real life and what is just pop culture fantasy.
This is Pop Psych 101.
Welcome back to Pop Psych 101. I am Hayley Roberts, here as literally always with my co-host Ryan Engelstad. Ryan, hello.
That's me. Hello, Hayley.
How does it feel to have the roles switched?
I have to say, something is kind of nice about it. It's very much like, sitting in the co-captain's chair, where it's just like, this person's got it under control. I just got to, watch the measures and the dots and make sure everything's still doing what it's supposed to do.
Beeping the way it's supposed to beep. I almost said my co-host, Dr. Ryan Engelstad, and I was like, oh, that's funny. It
I would have
is such a
enjoyed
pattern.
that.
So do you have any idea why I've flipped the script on you today? Why I haven't told you what we're doing, but I'm
it's just a
throwing it at
blatant
you.
Power grab. You're just seizing the reins.
Yeah. Well, it's curious to me that that's where you go.
No, other than you asked me to sort of identify a movie that's like one of my favorite movies of all time. I did that. And other than that, I'm just sort of confused but open. For as far as I'm concerned, I'm just improvising this whole thing. So
you kind of are, but it's going to be personal experience, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yes, that is true. I could talk about this movie at a moment's notice. So this will be the easy part. So
surprise, we may or may not talk about a movie.
Oh, okay. Great.
And the reason why is this is officially your 100th episode.
Wow.
So technically there's been more than that because we've had some,
right,
fall episodes and things like that. But this will be the one that's numbered as 100.
Okay.
Pretty exciting,
well, that's pretty
right?
cool.
I kind of considered I could have done this for your 101 episode. That would have been pretty funny too.
Shows how much I pay attention.
But I thought it might be really cool.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. So this is This Is Your Life edition of Pop Psych.
Yeah. Well, so I was thinking what we could do is this has been quite a journey for you because you started it with a partner and then you went independently for a while and then you picked me up along the way. And I thought it would be cool for you to kind of look back on that and talk about what it's been like for you. And then maybe we get into some inside out after that, but maybe we don't.
That sounds lovely. I appreciate the opportunity and I'm excited to talk about it because, this is just stuff that I love doing. So,
yeah, awesome.
Very cool. Thank you.
So I thought a way that we could kind of celebrate is by looking back on your whole experience. And we were kind of talking that maybe this is your number 99th episode because there might have been an episode that you weren't in. But yeah, I thought this was a pretty cool milestone. So
yeah, I'm taking credit for 100 now that you put it out there. So absolutely. It is a really cool number. I mean, when you start out to do something like this, you don't think about the end point necessarily. Not that this is an end point, but it's like
this is how I find out.
No, my gosh, no. No, and I shouldn't have said end point. You don't think about
future points.
when what a milestone would even look like, or maybe you certainly think about it in different ways. So yeah, so it's really cool, and it is a good opportunity to kind of look back because it has been a while, and I'm excited about where it's gone, and getting the chance to kind of think about that process is really cool. So
yeah. Awesome. So why don't you tell us the process of starting Pop Psych? How did you and Mike come up with the idea? Was it one of you? Was it both of you? How did you name it? How did you get started? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see, probably going back, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years now. As we're talking, I feel compelled to kind of look up some of this stuff because it's
I know
funny.
I was feeling that way too.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was directly connected to this or not, but I've always kind of been interested in like saying being a creator sounds very like
Mhm.
highfalutin now, but I think I've always been interested in sort of communicating the things that I think about to a larger audience. And I don't
Mhm.
know if that's because I'm a therapist and I do
Mhm.
like mostly listening,
Uh-huh.
or the talking I'm doing is just to one person. And
Uh-huh.
I think the thought that that's kind of grounded me throughout, and I've obviously done writing and stuff too, is like this information or this conversation or this insight
Mhm.
is so valuable to this one person. Everyone should have this insight
Mhm.
or this understanding, whether it's
Mhm.
of mental health or relationships or self care or whatever it may be.
Or even like that this movie represents it this way, but please don't think
Well,
that that's the
yeah.
way that it is. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I always, kind of consume things with an eye towards like, oh, I wonder why they portrayed this that way.
Oh,
Or, oh, I
funny.
wonder how other people react to this. I wonder if they react to it the same way that I do.
Mhm.
So,
Always with a
and
therapeutic lens?
yeah,
Or
well,
okay.
I guess to a certain extent, because um, and this plays into why I became a therapist in general, which is like I think I've always had a desire to understand why people do things the way that they do,
Mhm.
just in a very broad sense. Like, oh,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
why? Like
Like, "Oh,
that's
that's
sort of like,
curious."
where did
Yeah.
that come from?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think that plays into everything that I
Mhm.
do and that I watch, and obviously the people that I interact with as well. Um, so kind of going back, finding a accessible way to have these conversations, because what I had done very briefly before Pop Psych
Mhm.
was I had a solo show that I was just like messing around with
Okay, what
basically.
was that show?
So that was called The Best Medicine. And like
Oh.
the sort of idea behind it was not so dissimilar from this, but
Mhm.
basically like I wanted to have funny or entertaining ways of talking about mental health.
Yeah.
So I was like trying to do that, but doing it on your own is sort of hard.
It's hard to make yourself laugh.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to know if it's good or not. I mean, it's hard to know if it's funny. It's hard to know if it's,
And riffs are hard just, like,
yeah,
independently.
well, right.
Yeah.
And I'm a person that doesn't tend to do a lot of writing,
Mhm.
at least when it comes to recording. Like I kind of like
Mhm.
to just talk off the top,
Mhm.
which doesn't necessarily suit itself to a one man show. So after playing around with that for a little while, and I just looked, we're going back to 2018. So yeah, just about 4 years ago, which is interesting.
Wow. So that comes out at just about 1 episode every 2 weeks, and that's
Yeah,
only if we take the actual numbered ones and you
yeah,
have others that weren't numbered.
yeah, that's right.
That's a lot of dedication.
It is, and it's really cool to think about that. But I think this sort of original idea and sort of how I got connected with Mike was basically I need someone else to participate in this because it is a conversation, right? But
Yeah.
it's a way to sort of trigger the questions I wouldn't think about on my own.
Mhm.
So watching a movie with someone else, even from a
Mhm.
distance, I found Mike on Facebook, in a
Okay.
podcasters
Oh, that sounds
support
familiar.
group or something. And we started talking about this sort of very broad idea that I had, and he was very interested in it. He's a guy that also had a podcast, or no,
Mhm.
he had like a YouTube show.
Okay.
I think that he still does to a certain extent, and it was like video game focused. But
Hmm.
and if you go back and listen to our episodes, is a person that was very open about his own mental health
Mhm.
challenges that he's experienced. So
Yeah.
that dynamic I thought was really interesting in the context of, someone who has personal experience with mental health issues
Mhm.
watching some of these movies and
Yeah.
shows, combined with a person who is in many ways, an expert on these issues.
Mhm.
And in many ways, he was the person that would ask questions to me like, oh, like this is what I'm seeing, or this is like, is that accurate? Or
Uh-huh.
this is how this made me feel. Like, is that what you
Yeah.
think they were going for?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
I hope. I think. I mean, it's certainly we started off with that being the dynamic, and we had a lot of fun with it.
That's fun.
Yeah, so that's the
Yeah.
some of the
So
origin.
you came up with this, like, I want to have this conversation about mental health in kind of a lighthearted way. And then you presented the movie, TV, pop culture thing on the Facebook group. And he was like, oh, I would be interested in co hosting that with you.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and he came on, and he brought exactly, I think, some of the perspective that I was looking
Yeah.
for, where it was sort of like the things that he noticed, or the things that he was reacting to,
Hmm.
were in some ways similar, but in some ways it's very different because based off
Yeah.
his own personal experiences. So that kind of allowed us to explore some of these topics from his personal perspective,
Uh huh.
which he came in being really open to doing that, which I thought created some really cool
Yeah.
conversations and moments where we acknowledged that I was not I was not his therapist, and I was
Uh
not
huh.
giving him therapy, but we were
Yeah.
exploring, which I think happens for people.
Hmm.
You watch a movie or you watch a TV show, and when it hits home for you,
Hmm.
and that's not just people with mental health issues, that's
Hmm.
everyone.
Hmm.
I think being able to kind of understand, wow, this one really hit me, or wow,
Hmm.
this one, did this or did that, or this is how I felt. Like being able to explore that, I think is really valuable for people. In
Yeah.
the same way you and I have talked about it, like sort of understanding almost like the therapy experience.
Uh huh.
It was for, I think Mike coming in, it was for people never having been in therapy or never having talked about these things, sort of
Uh
like
huh.
coming at it from that perspective. So yeah, I think it was really, it was fun. And the name is a funny thing. I wish I had the like old like chat logs,
Uh huh.
because I mean naming stuff is so weird.
Hmm.
I'm sure we tossed around some different like ridiculous names. And let's see. Wow, I mean, I guess I came from it from the idea of like popcorn psychology is
Hmm.
like is number one, is also a podcast that does a lot of similar stuff
Yeah.
to
Uh
what
huh.
we do, and they're
Very
great.
cool. Yeah.
And I was coming at it from like the literal sort of pop psychology
Yeah.
idea, where just the way that people talk about
Uh huh.
mental health sometimes
Hmm.
in social media, in movies, just sort of
Hmm.
like in day-to-day conversations, is very much just like this, oh my god, I'm so bipolar, or
Oh
oh,
my
that's
gosh.
so OCD of me. And
Yeah.
it's like,
The current
well,
one is ADHD. Everybody
yes,
is like
100%.
the neurodivergent urge.
Self-diagnosing.
Yeah. Uh
Yes,
huh.
yes, yes. And wanting to kind of not necessarily push back on that as much as reality check that.
Uh huh.
Because I think a lot of that stuff does come from media, right, in
Hmm.
one form or another. So
Yeah.
pop psychology became pop psych 101 because I
Hmm.
wanted it to have this educational but also like entry level feel of
Oh,
like,
cool.
you don't
Yeah.
have to know anything. You can
Hmm.
come into this conversation just knowing, oh, that's a movie or TV show that I like, and we'll kind of take you from there, and you'll be
Yeah.
able to kind of be on board with understanding the mental health pieces of it.
Yeah. And I think what's really cool about the way that the title works really well in different circumstances is with Mike, he was more kind of like the quote unquote student and you were
Yeah,
more the
totally.
instructor.
Yeah.
And now with you and I, it's like we're the instructors talking to
Mm-hmm.
the audience as students.
Yes. Yes.
So I think it works in both, which is really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So after you and Mike decided to part ways, you then kind of had what I labeled in our description, I think, as your solo career.
Yes.
Um, so what was that like for you?
Well, it presented in both ways a unique challenge and a unique opportunity, because I wanted to keep doing it, and the fact that Mike and I went our separate ways, and for good reason. Mike and his
Hmm.
family were off doing some amazing adventure stuff that
Hmm.
just made it difficult to keep it going, and
Yeah.
I was happy for him to be able to make those decisions.
And I don't think people realize how much work running a podcast and producing a podcast yourself is.
Yes.
And that's partly why I'm kind of like 100 is incredible. Like, I've been in this journey with you for a while, but I also like sometimes you and I are just like, I can't. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
100%.
like, it's a
Yeah.
lot. And I think, when life shows up, if you're not getting paid and somebody's not producing it for you, like sometimes the podcast is going to be the thing that gets pushed to the side. So
Very
yeah.
true. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I give a lot of credit to Mike, and now to you, who you both have been extremely helpful in navigating a lot of those like production challenges.
Hmm.
and Tristan is
Mhm.
also a friend of the show and has helped
Yeah.
with editing and producing
Mhm.
stuff as well. So you can't do it by yourself, and that's why when I had tried, it was either like, okay, I'm just gonna like punt on editing. I'm just gonna like
Put it
put out some
out.
unedited
Yeah.
stuff, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, and then, and I think this is, for anyone who's looking to start a podcast, like there are some really good Facebook groups out there,
Yeah.
because this is one of the resources that I used in my quote unquote solo career, was just like, okay, I want to talk about this specific thing. So why not find a specific person who has like a passion or an interest in that thing,
Mhm.
and we just kind of take it from that angle. So, um, or in the event of me just, oh, like, hey, I just watched a movie and I really want to talk about it with someone.
Uh-huh.
Hey, anybody want to talk about this with me?
Uh-huh.
That sometimes worked as well. And what I think that led to was some diversity in the sense of like
Mhm.
new voices and different sort of formats to kind of play around with. But I think it also kind of reinforced the sense for me that, okay, rotating guest hosts more or less is something that can work to a certain extent, but
Uh-huh.
really, having someone who's bought in and committed in the same way that I have been, I think what I ended up then looking for again,
Mhm.
because it's just, you mentioned the load, but I also think there's a relationship dynamic. There's a sort of a
Rapport.
cadence or a rapport, I think is the right word,
And it's a good
that
therapeutic
really
word too.
helps.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
ooh, ooh, hold on, my cat is about to destroy my
Oh.
setup. So you were looking for a co-host again.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
this is what, like 2 years ago at this point?
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking right before I reached out to you. Yeah. Yeah, it was so funny. That like very brief time period where I was doing some episodes on my own. I mean, I did an episode with my daughter and my brother and an improv friend of mine, and random people that I
Mhm.
found on Facebook. And then I even like played around with a couple of solo things here and
Mhm.
there. So I did a whole bunch of weird stuff. But suffice it to say, I think it did bring me back to this idea of, having someone that I can build rapport with to really kind of develop that consistency again, was
Mhm.
what I was hoping to find.
Okay. So then the way that you and I met, which I don't know if I think maybe we've shared this, but I don't know. But the way
Mm,
you and I met was on a on one of those Facebook groups.
yep.
And had you mentioned your podcast? Do you remember if you had mentioned your podcast in general and I had reached out to you, or do you remember if you were like looking for a specific discussion to be had?
Oh no, I don't think I was looking for a specific discussion.
Okay.
I think it was like an open, like, hey, here's my show.
Yeah.
Looking for people who might be interested in
Mhm.
co-hosting.
Yeah. Did
And
you say co-hosting or did you say joining me for an episode?
that is a good question. I can probably,
I think you just said joining me for an episode. And the reason why is
yeah.
because I remember being like, oh my God, like if this goes well, I wonder if he like wants a co-host because
You
I
know
had
what?
been
That
looking
actually, that
for a
does sound right.
podcast.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny, because that was probably around the same time that I had been doing kind of one-offs.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I think our initial conversation was definitely around that idea of like, yeah, let's do one and see
Uh-huh.
how it goes.
Yeah.
But if we're both kind of interested, I think you kind of very upfront said like, this is something that I would like to do.
Uh which again, very much my version of communication. Here's what I'm thinking. How do
Yeah.
you feel, person that I
But
don't
hey,
actually
I
know
mean,
yet?
yeah. I mean, I respond very well to people with that sort of clear communication and clear idea
Uh-huh.
of a sense of buy-in, I think, is
Mhm.
sort of the good way to put it.
Yeah.
And you kind of said, you kind of, once you're in something, you're in it.
Mhm.
So I was excited, and that definitely like re-kicked up the motivation and excitement for me. So yeah.
Well, that's nice.
Well, well, I mean, you acknowledge like the length of time, but I think, part of that is showing up to do it.
Mhm.
all as often as you can, right? That
Mhm.
consistency, because certainly after Mike and I finished, there was, probably a couple weeks, maybe a couple months period there where it was just kind of like twiddling my thumbs, like, do I want to? If I want
Mhm.
to, yes, I want to. Okay, but how? Okay, maybe that I could try that. Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
And then, sort of haphazardly playing around one-off episodes. Um, that is doing the whole show
Uh-huh.
yourself, right?
Uh-huh.
Especially with,
Yeah.
guest hosting. So having someone such as yourself come and be like, well, I want to do this. Like I'm in if you are, basically,
Uh-huh.
was easy for me to be like, oh my God, like that's amazing. That is exactly the energy I need right
Like
now
a little bit of
to
relief.
kind of, yeah, well, it's reinvigorating. I mean, as someone who's played around with a lot of independent ventures,
Mhm.
having someone who you can check in with week after week, who can be like, yeah, so this is what we're doing,
Mhm.
and still on for tonight, basically.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, yeah, of course, like,
Uh-huh.
looking forward to it, because otherwise it's much easier to just kind of let go of something when it's
Uh-huh.
just you,
Uh-huh.
because you can kind of just imagine, like, no one out there is waiting for an episode from just me. Like, who
Uh-huh.
cares if I
Yeah.
put something out or not?
Speaking into the
But
void.
yes, but if there's something that you're doing with someone,
Mhm.
whether there's a void there or not, that it's like, okay, no, I've committed to this. My
Yeah.
partner's committed to this, so let's do it.
Hell
So,
yeah. That's fun.
so
I've enjoyed it. I think there have been times, and we've kind of mentioned this, where we've had conversations of like, this is how I'm feeling, this is how you're feeling, how's it going? What can we change up? What can we do
yeah,
differently? And I think we've found a really nice middle ground of like recognizing that each person is human as well as podcast partner.
I hope so.
Yeah. Even the conversation for tonight, I was like, do you want to do it tonight or do you want to do it later? And you're like, I don't know. And then finally we're like, okay, let's just do it.
Yes.
Which I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do some fun questions.
Great. I love fun questions.
Do you have a favorite episode?
That is a good question. So something about me is, and like, as the person that does the editing, I don't know, I don't know if this will upset you or not, but I have a hard time listening back to my own voice.
Oh, I don't even listen to it
Okay.
after I've edited
After
it.
the editing, right.
Yeah.
So I have a really good time recording.
Yeah.
I'm excited, I'm engaged, and then afterwards, it might as well disappear from my brain
Mhm.
until we're publishing, and then it's like,
Mhm.
oh, that's right, and here are the themes we talked about, and
Mhm.
and sort of connecting with people over it.
Mhm.
So in thinking about, specific episodes, it's hard, because it's like, it's almost like, do you have a favorite movie? It's
Mhm.
like, well, I've found exciting ways to talk about just about anything, like
Mhm.
movies I never would have watched if it wasn't for this
Mhm.
show, all the way to like favorite movies of mine. So it's funny. I mean, and I think this is sort of in part because we've done multiple episodes on it, but
Mhm.
talking in the detail that we went into on Ted Lasso has been
Uh-huh.
really fun.
Yeah.
I think sometimes
And the detail episodes haven't been released yet.
that's okay. That's just a hint for people to pay attention.
Yeah, come back soon.
Yes. I think sometimes when we're especially talking about a TV show or a
Mhm.
long movie,
Mhm.
there's like meat on the bone still. Like, there's
Uh-huh.
like things that, oh man, oh, and this thing, we didn't even talk about this.
Yeah.
Um, so to feel like there's something out there that we have drained every little piece of
Uh-huh.
mental health insight from it
Uh-huh.
is very satisfying. I have to
Very
say, I really
satisfying.
liked doing, I mean, again, you'll have to look out for this when it comes, but we did a quotes episode, and we did a therapy episode, and we
Uh-huh.
did a character breakdown episode, and it's like,
Uh-huh.
wow, like that is the depth that I geek out a little bit about.
Uh-huh.
So I'm really excited for people to hear that.
Yeah.
And similarly, even when we did episode by episode of In Treatment
Mhm.
and really deep into
Yeah.
specific therapy sessions,
Uh-huh.
really enjoying that,
Yeah.
because it's such like specific insight for people, I hopefully for me to benefit from. So anytime it's like super in the weeds,
Yeah.
I just get kind of really excited and into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like that too. So, audience, if you like when we go in depth into one thing over multiple episodes, please leave that in reviews or send us messages and let us know, because we will absolutely do that if we feel that the thing has enough meat for us to do that, because it's fun.
Yeah.
And also, like, it's, I guess
Well,
it's
it's fun,
kind of,
and
yeah, go ahead. This is your episode, Ryan. You go
no,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, no, it's okay. Well, that's a great point because we've done 100 episodes. That's why the ones that stick out to me are the ones that were a little bit different. Like
Uh-huh.
I really liked doing the songs from Frozen.
Uh-huh. You were so
I
excited
know
about
that was
that
like
one.
a weird to produce episode, and
Uh-huh.
like I don't know if it totally worked the way I wanted it to in my head, but that was really fun because it's like, oh man, there's this whole other thing too. Like people listen to music when they're sad or
Uh-huh.
angry, and like, isn't that a fun thing
Uh-huh.
to kind of play with and talk about? So it's like opens up these little branches out from the normal like trunk of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those, when I look back on some of those things, it's it's exciting to think about the different ways we've played with what this
Yeah.
is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, that's why I like, when I think about my favorite ones, ironically, like, the ones that stick out are WandaVision, Queen's Gambit, and Palm Springs, but those were my first 3, so
I
that
was gonna
might be
say,
why they
yeah,
stick out.
yeah.
But also, I think the one we did recently on Midsummer, the I didn't get as excited about it in the same way as I've gotten excited about other ones, but that's because I came in with, like, no idea,
Yep.
right? But I did find it really fun. The discussion that we had and the way that we played with it was just fun because
Yeah.
it was different and unique. And so, again, if you guys like those kind of alternative ones, we'll absolutely do them. Is there either a movie
Hmm.
or an episode that you've either done and hated, or hated so much that you didn't do?
Like an episode that I recorded.
Well, so, like, remember there was one movie that you and I were going to do, and I
Oh,
watched
yes.
it and I messaged you and I was like, no, like, I'm going to be miserable if we have to record this because I hate this movie so much.
Oh, yes.
So,
I'm trying to remember. I feel like that's happened a couple times. Why is there
no, I
one
only did
specific
it
one?
once. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And it was
So the Melissa McCarthy
that movie
movie?
that everybody loved.
No.
No, I love
Oh,
Melissa
okay.
McCarthy. No, it was the one about the woman who gets sexually assaulted on camera and then she kills the guy and
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
most promising woman. So is there a movie or a TV show or that you've
hmm,
hated so much that you are like, no, I'm absolutely not
like I would
recording an
never go
episode?
there.
Or is there a movie that sticks out of you're like, no, I did it, but I hated that movie?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So there was, now I'm trying to remember because you asking me that question
Hmm.
triggered something that was like, yeah, we picked out this really random movie.
You and I
Yeah. And
remember
then
which
I
one it was.
watched it. You do remember?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I want to see if you can figure it out. Because you messaged me like,
It was
what
like
the
something with a bird. It was like something with a bird, a woman, there's a bird in her front yard. Am I making this
what?
up?
Yes. No,
No,
you
this is
hated the Rebel Wilson
Sparrow. It's called
movie.
Sparrow or something.
Oh. Yeah, no. That was I think was it not Finch?
No, we did Finch.
Yeah. No. But I was thinking it was the name of a bird.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, so the movie that you hated was the Rebel Wilson movie.
Oh yeah.
You're
Um,
like, "Do we wanna do this?" And I was like, "Yes, I loved it."
so that's really funny. Yeah, and look, I think with all the stuff that we've done, I mean, and this is like echoes of me doing the show with Mike too. Like
Uh-huh.
when things have a personal sort of connection to me or something comes up, basically like my own transference stuff,
Uh-huh.
it's either going to cause me to love the movie and be
Uh-huh.
really excited to talk about it,
Uh-huh.
or be like, I mean, this is basically the attitude I had going into it. It was
Uh-huh.
just like, I mean, this really, why? Like, I don't, who cares about this? And
Uh-huh.
it's just coming from a place of this made me uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
And I think for me, what I, and why I'm glad we ended up recording it is because I think those are important moments
Mhm.
for anyone to embrace.
Uh-huh.
Like, why am I being weird about this? Like,
Uh-huh.
let's just dive in and figure it out. And
Uh-huh.
there's stuff there,
Yeah.
obviously. It was around the time of my high school reunion that
Uh-huh.
didn't end up happening.
Yeah.
It's so dumb. But it's like all that stuff. It's like, do we really want to go back to this time? Who cares? But it was because part of me really wanted to go back to that time, but I was
Mhm.
in my head about how what it was going to look like.
Uh-huh.
The answer is nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and I guess the inverse of that, and maybe you're going to ask this, but it's like is something else. But when I think about things that I really didn't want to do, like, yeah, that's probably the big one. It's funny, the movie Hypnotic was, there have been times when I think you and I have just kind of like been desperate to find something, and it's like,
Mhm.
oh, here's a weird movie on Netflix or Hulu or
Mhm.
whatever, and it's something that I never would have watched
Mhm.
for any other reason,
Mhm.
and not even having like my own personal curiosity about
Yeah.
it. And
That definitely
then
was that movie.
watching that movie, I was also mad because of how stereotypical it was, and just like not very well done.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I also think is
yeah.
really cool for us to kind of share with the audience is we've talked about there's a difference between there being a movie where we say like, no, like I'm not
Hmm.
doing this. But there was a while where it was also like, well, if you don't like the movie, we don't have to record. And I think it was me because it sounds like something I'd say where I'd be like, I don't have to like the movie for us to record.
You
Like
did.
that
Yeah.
actually plays a role in
Hmm.
how it's received and the
Totally.
psychology of it. And I like that we do that because if we only stick to movies that we like, chances are we're missing movies that either don't portray it well or do portray it well.
100%. and
Yeah.
and probably also that there's stuff out there that people might want us to watch
Mhm.
or break down, that if we don't have, like, if it's not something on our radar, it's not something that we quote unquote want to watch or not, then we're missing out on what other people are looking for, are
Uh-huh.
enjoying. And I think, to your point, like, if someone wants us to watch a show or movie that's like, God, I would never watch that. It's like, oh, well, but if you're interested in it enough, there's surely something there
Mhm.
that's worth taking a look at. And
Mhm.
I'm always excited when someone asks us to do that, because it
Yeah.
means that not only are people watching something and thinking about it, but they're also
Uh-huh.
thinking about us, which is
Uh-huh.
obviously very cool. And I
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah,
that.
that is really cool. Please leave reviews. That's super helpful. um, yeah, I just had a reaction. So there was that one movie that I referenced that I was like, no, I'm absolutely not going to record this. But I also now am remembering how aggressively I hated Euphoria.
Oh gosh,
You remember
sure.
I was like, I
Yeah.
mean, we can talk about it, but I'm upset. I don't understand why people like this. So funny. Okay. Let me look at what other questions I have.
Okay, because I was gonna say I could talk about the best, sort of like in the same vein of when you asked favorite
Oh, yeah,
episodes,
yeah, yeah.
the sort of movies or shows that I've been the most excited to talk about.
Uh-huh.
Irregardless of how the episode went, just sort of like the idea and how it came together. I recorded an episode with my daughter Bryn on
Mm.
her favorite show at the time, which was Butterbean's Cafe, which is just like a little kids show about
Yeah.
fairies that have a bakery, right?
Oh, cute.
And so that was really fun, and it's sort of, and we've had her periodically like do things at the end of our
Reviews.
episodes,
Mhm.
but obviously sharing that was really cool. I did Onward with my brother, which is
Mm,
obviously like a
mhm.
brother's movie.
Mhm.
That was very cool because it was right around the time when he was, I want to say, about to get married.
Oh, that
So
is
it's just like
nice.
that was like a good, like
Yeah.
just like a good
Feel
like
good.
family feel
Mhm.
good thing. Yeah. And anytime the movie is like particularly close to home for me, and I can certainly think of some examples, but much in the way that Mike shared a lot of his personal experiences, anytime I get the opportunity to do that myself, and obviously as a therapist, you and I, within reason, are
Yeah.
conscious of self-disclosure.
Yeah.
I think it's an opportunity that I try to take seriously, in the sense
Mhm.
that, like, I want what I would share about myself to be valuable.
Mhm.
But also, like, sometimes these movies just hit you in that very personal way,
Mhm.
and it's important to talk about those personal things,
Uh-huh.
and why it's such a, important movie to you, or why
Mhm.
it's your favorite movie, or why,
Yeah.
it gave you this reaction when it might not give other people that same
Uh-huh.
reaction, right?
Yeah. That's one thing that I was
Yeah.
going to say that is really nice about the dynamic that you had with Mike is that he wasn't in a position where you and I are in, where self-disclosure is public self-disclosure that would be available to our patients potentially.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be
Yep.
really thoughtful about.
Yes.
And there's professional risk in sharing personal struggle or personal success or personal
Yep.
stuff. And I think it's really nice that you were able to have that dynamic with him. And then also, just like you said, the moments where you do get to share with like your family members or
Mm-hmm.
just like personal reactions. I think that's nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you and I strike a good balance with it as well.
Hmm.
Because I think, the reason anyone would ask us to talk about a show or movie is because it's important to them.
Hmm.
And I will say, like, one of the biggest regrets that I have
Hmm.
in past episodes is we did an episode on Doctor Who,
Hmm.
and the episode we watched was when Doctor Who, played by Matt Smith, goes back in time to visit Vincent van Gogh, which I don't know if you
Okay.
were a Doctor Who person,
I mean, I
but
know it, but I haven't
yeah,
seen it.
so we and it's probably because I didn't watch a lot of Doctor Who. It's never really been a show that I've caught up on,
Hmm.
but it was someone asked us to watch this specific episode,
Uh-huh.
and it was their favorite episode of their favorite
Yeah.
show, and we did not treat it with the amount of care that I think this person would have wanted us to.
Oh no. You broke their toy.
A little bit, and I do regret that when I think back on it, because every now and then I'll get like a TikTok of the scene from this episode. And I'm like, oh my god, like this
Oh
is the
no.
episode for people. Like, I I can't believe I talked about this show in a way that like this was a little schmaltzy, or like it was that kind of thing where it's like,
Ah.
not that I criticized the show as much as took the wind out of the emotional sails of what it was
Mm.
trying to do.
Mhm.
So, I
Yeah.
think that's where, when I'm being analytical or over analytical,
Uh-huh.
that's where I think it becomes potentially, not dangerous is probably too strong of a word, but like,
Well, it takes the magic away.
it hurt. Yeah, it can
Yeah.
hurt people who really do, care about this stuff, that it's a important part of their lives. So I try to be more
Yeah.
conscious of that now.
Well, if you want to redo that episode, we can redo that episode. Do you have a preference between movies, TVs, books, in not in your personal life, but for the
Sure.
show or in your personal life? Whatever
um,
you do, you.
Yeah. So, and I would say for the show and in general, like my go-to is always movies, because it's a specific arc told succinctly, right?
Hmm.
So, especially for the show, it gives us like a beginning point, a a middle point, and an end point,
Hmm.
where our show can also have that sort of narrative.
Hmm.
Whereas when we do TV shows, it's, we're jumping into this season of this show because of this specific arc,
Hmm.
and we know that there are a history of things that happened before and probably a history of things that happened after this,
Hmm.
but we're just focusing on this one moment. And if I'm not an expert on the show, there might be things that I missed from the history or the after stuff
Hmm.
that it might be important context. So
Hmm.
that's why I'm always a little nervous to do a show that I
Yeah.
haven't like fully
Scene.
consumed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess in that same vein, I would love to do more books. There's a great podcast out there called Novel Feelings, I want to
We
say. Is
did.
there?
Yeah, we did Bridgerton. Yeah.
Yes, that does exactly that, and I
Hmm.
think they are well equipped to do it. I am a very slow reader. It takes me a long time to finish a book.
Hmm.
A lot of times I don't finish books, and I think
Hmm.
it's because of the same experience of like, I've got an hour and a half. Well, I could watch a whole story, or I
Hmm.
could bite off a very small part of a
Yeah.
chapter or of,
Uh-huh.
an episode of something, and sort
Uh-huh.
of feel like I'm just getting a tease of the whole arc. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I come in.
I think I agree with you. Like when I was thinking about my answer for that question, I was thinking for the podcast thematically, I really like movies. And because it's like easy to be like this
Yeah.
theme, this theme, this theme, and we have all the information we could possibly have about it. Whereas TV shows are actually a little bit more in line with kind of how therapy goes a little bit, which is like there may be main
Week
themes,
to
but
week.
there's
Yeah.
also all of these like other themes that you don't ever get to, even though they were mentioned, or like you get more in depth into a character, or there's character change over time. So, like in movies, there's generally like a character's growth happens in a very specific way, and that's that for the movie. In TV shows, it's more a real kind of illustration of humanity, which is like
Yeah.
some people change very slowly in a way that won't be seen over a season, but then somebody else might change drastically, and then trying to like talk about like how real life occurs, or like how these changes occur in an hour amongst other themes can be really hard.
Yeah, and I will say one of the things I like about when we do TV shows is it feels much more of the moment, like a TV show that is capturing the attention of the country or the
Mhm.
world is a really exciting sort of note to join the chorus on.
Mhm.
It's like when we've done Ted Lasso, it's like Ted Lasso is huge right now.
Mhm.
Let's sort of kind of talk about what people are talking about. So being a part of a broader conversation is something I always get excited to
Mhm.
do. And I think
Especially now that TV shows are coming back to week rather than all at once,
yeah.
like, the conversation about them stays alive a little bit longer.
Yeah, and it's a slow build and you can
Mhm.
kind of jump in right at the middle or right at the end
Mhm.
and that feels like, oh, we're talking about something that is topical, whereas
Mhm.
movies can sort of come and go and peak and do
Mhm.
anniversaries and you can kind of do favorites, and some people's movies are just around forever, and that's
Mhm.
great, sort of evergreen.
Mhm.
And that's why I think they both have utility in that sense
Uh-huh.
as far as the show goes. And
Totally.
that's why books are so tough because I mean, even looking at like the New York Times bestseller list,
Mhm.
some books have real staying power and
Mhm.
they're forever, but it's pretty rare that a book captures that sort of attention
Mhm.
of the moment. So it's a little bit harder to do books. I
And
think
when they do, it's usually series,
it's
and
a
then it's like, "Oh,
series,
great, I have
right?
to
Or
read
it's
7
like
books?" Yeah.
yeah, or it's like you do the book because the TV show just came out or
Mhm.
because the
Mhm.
movie just came out. It's like, all right, we're really only talking about the movie that's based on
Mhm.
a book.
Mhm. Well, I can
So
read a
yeah.
book in just a number of days, so clearly this is on you.
It's a summer. That's a skill. Well, listen, I'll put it this way. If there was a book that's like, oh my gosh, this representation is incredible, I would commit to reading it. I just can't commit to how long that would take.
Great. Or what we do is if I find there's a book like that, I'll
Yeah.
do what you did with Midsummer.
Oh, great. Perfect. That's the best way to do it.
Okay, great. Do you have a character that you over the 100 episodes that you were like, they were fun to talk about, either because of how well it was done or just in general?
Oh, interesting. I'm scrolling through episodes because that's such a fun
Yeah.
question. There are so many fun characters to think about. Wow. It's interesting because, I would say, especially when I think about Disney movies that we've done, the characters are most often like kids
Mhm.
or, sort of adolescents. Um, and, you know, you tricked me into today's episode by having us sort of talk about Inside Out, and
I
like
think we should
that's
still do that episode because I
okay,
would love to. Okay.
great.
I know
Well, the
you've done it
reason,
before, but
yeah, oh no, it's okay.
it'll look different.
So one of the reasons that I love Inside Out is because we get the very much the inner monologue in like five different feeling flavors of
Mhm.
a character, which is something that unless you have a character with an internal monologue that you get to hear in the course of a
Mhm.
movie, for example, it's just like insight into a person that you don't get otherwise.
Mhm.
So that's why Riley from Inside Out is one of my favorite characters because you're talking about happiness and sadness and anger and disgust and fear as individual characters, but they're all her,
Mhm.
which I just think is so fun and fascinating. And I just love it because it does it in a way that,
Mhm.
you don't really see elsewhere.
Yeah. Do you
Okay.
feel seen? Like, do you feel like, oh, Riley is me and I am Riley?
Yes.
Okay, me too. So it's not just me. But that's so funny because when
Yes,
I
I do.
watch it, I'm like, oh, Riley's me. Like that this
Yeah.
character is me. That's so
Yes, I do.
funny.
Yes,
Interesting.
100%.
Well, that just shows you
Yep.
how well that character
Mhm.
is created.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, God, thinking about other examples, anytime we've done like ensembles, sometimes is fun to kind of almost look at group dynamics.
Mhm.
Like it's not so much one character as it is, oh, like what's happening in this whole group or this whole family
Mhm.
that gets broken down. And even some of the episodes you and I have done recently, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, like it's a
Mhm.
family study, it's a
Mhm.
relationship study. um I really like interpersonal dynamics just as much as I like,
Yeah.
specific character
Mhm.
studies.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. Is there a movie or a TV show that you've always wanted to do and you've never done for whatever reason, or one that you can't wait to do?
Oh, wow, that's a great question too. So it's
Thanks.
funny because,
I'm going to pause
some
you for 1 second.
okay,
Patients will frequently say that to me, like, oh, great question. And my response is
you say it
always,
to me
thanks, it's my job.
too.
That's always my response.
I
I
never say anything. I'm just like, okay.
always go, thanks, it's my job.
Yeah. Um, so so it's funny because you and I just recorded Midsummer,
Uh-huh.
and recording Midsummer and the way that we recorded it
Uh-huh.
made me feel like,
Oh, great. Do I have more horror movies in my future?
maybe, I don't know. I mean, no, I bring it up because one of the movies that did come up as I was thinking about favorite movies and
Uh-huh.
things that I haven't done the show was like The Sixth Sense, for
Uh-huh.
example,
I've seen
um,
Sense.
which is a scary movie, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's also got all these very interesting elements of of therapy, of grief,
Yeah.
of validation of one child's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that was that's one, and
I would
also brings
definitely do
me.
that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But it also brings me down that road of what other scary movies are there? Because Haley, I have to tell you, after I watched Midsummer. You did
After
not
I
watch
watched
Midsummer.
you talk
After we
about it.
talked about Midsummer, I immediately found myself starting scrolling through like scary movies on
Of course.
Netflix.
It's also the season for it.
Yeah, no, it for sure. And I think within a couple days after we recorded Midsummer, I watched Hellraiser,
Oh my gosh. I know nothing
which
about Hellraiser.
and I'm not going to tell you anything about it other than it's
Not yet.
basically a remake of a movie. And the remake is on Hulu. The
Mhm.
original, like 4 or 5 Hellraisers were on in the 80s.
Uh-huh.
And, I'm watching it literally as if we were going to talk about it on the show, knowing we're probably not going to. Because it's straight horror. I mean,
Uh-huh.
there's like definitely elements of like, oh, it's think about the society of which this sort of thing
Uh-huh.
could happen, but it's so it's funny to think about the genres of
Mhm.
movies
Mhm.
that we do or don't do,
Mhm.
because I think you and I have acknowledged that I'd say most movies or TV shows we talk about are either like straight dramas
Mhm.
or like kids movies. Like we
Mhm.
do a lot of Disney, we've doing a lot of, Marvel
Mhm.
and some things like that occasionally when they've popped up. Not a ton of comedies, although Senior Year is a good example
Mhm.
of
And
one
Palm
we have
Springs.
done.
Yeah.
Palm Springs, which is a favorite episode because I really love that movie.
Yeah, that movie was so
But
great.
so if there's something I'm interested in doing, it's how can we explore other genres, right?
Mhm.
And whether that's like I think I've done one, maybe Mike and I did one documentary. You and I guess I did a sports
Oh, we did a
documentary as
documentary
well.
with Shane,
And
yeah.
obviously, yeah, and obviously there are specific reasons why we don't frequently do
Mhm.
documentaries. We try not to tread too closely to diagnosing or analyzing real people.
Mhm.
But I think just throwing an idea out there there's like a couple Netflix things around right now where it's like, oh, like the theory of the infinite, and it's just like talking about people's wild theories about the universe. And it's like, oh,
Uh-huh.
well, is that so? Like, how would we do something like that?
Okay.
Or like, there's a psychedelics, documentary
Mhm.
that's based on a book, of
Mhm.
course. And it's like, oh, how would we do that?
Mhm.
So I think that much in the way of like how we recently explored doing a straight horror movie,
Mhm.
I find myself intrigued by the ideas of other ways that we could explore, let's just say, media that is
Uh-huh.
out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not like explicitly a human storyline.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm down, so let's do it.
Okay. Well, there
Okay.
you go.
Okay. If you had to guess, and you may know this already or you may have
Hmm.
looked at it,
Sure.
what is your top listened to episode?
Um, I know the first episode we did is up there.
Yeah. So that frequently happens with podcasts is people
Yeah, it's
start at
just
the
like people
beginning and so
find
it's like
you.
most
Yeah.
listened to. Yeah. Okay.
And I think our first episode was Fight Club.
All I can
I
see
think
is
that's
dissociative identity disorder.
yeah, and Fight
Yeah,
Club, I'm
which
pretty
would
sure.
make sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
then what is the most listened to episode besides episode number 1?
Is it Ted Lasso?
So I was going to
I
say
know that was
yes, but it's
high.
not. So your second episode, schizoid personality disorder
Okay.
in Lars and the Real Girl.
Which is such a funny episode that's number 2, because
That's so
that's
funny.
just the second movie we did.
Oh, that's funny. That one has only 3 more views than
Wow.
Ted Lasso.
Wow.
So
Okay.
technically, yes, Ted Lasso is second because if you think about it, people listen to episode 1 and then they listen to episode 2.
Of
So that
course.
gives those 2 really big
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
So your most listened to episode out of all of them, not accounting for order, is
Hmm.
Ted Lasso, which is not that surprising because we released it right before the second season. People were really talking about it.
Nailed that topical moment.
Yeah, we have a whole Ted Lasso month coming up soon.
Oh, just you wait. Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to what I've kind of always wanted the show to be, which is the conversations that people are having right now.
Mhm.
What are people talking about? What questions are they asking? And how can we explore that in a way that both entertains and educates them about those
Yeah.
issues?
Yeah. And what I've found is kind of interesting is that like people don't seem to talk about TV shows the way that they used to. Like I'm even thinking like I expected Euphoria to do really well, our
Sure.
Euphoria episode, because we watched it right when everybody was talking about it.
Yep.
And I don't even see it on here. So that means it's
Sure.
like pretty far down.
Sure.
Also like I didn't like it. But it does, like, I've noticed, like, we're gonna, also another spoiler alert, we're gonna be doing She-Hulk sometime soon, and
Yes.
I've seen people talking about it online, but not really, right?
It
So
sort of like peaked when it first started coming out, and then yeah, which is what a lot of these shows do now, is basically like it has a moment and then it sort of trends on Twitter, and then it just sort of fades into the
yeah,
like maybe it'll peak a little bit when the episode premieres,
yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, that's why
Yeah.
something like Ted Lasso or Game of Thrones
Mhm.
is so impressive, is because, like, with all this, like, ability to put your focus in so many different places these days, people
Yes.
are following along together and on the same team about it, which I think is
Yeah.
pretty fun.
Mhm.
So those are all my questions that I had prepared. How does it feel to look back on it and think about moving forward as well? Like all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I want to thank you for doing this, because I do really appreciate it. Having someone who is, as I would say, passionate and committed to doing this show has been really helpful and been really invigorating for me. So I appreciate your openness to my
Aw.
random Facebook message, and I hope this has been what you would have wanted it to be when you were open to that first episode idea.
Mhm.
But thinking about 4-ish years of doing pop psych, I think one of the things I'm most grateful for is people who have listened, because it
Mhm.
does feel like a void sometimes.
Uh-huh.
But whether it's family and friends who have said, "Hey, I loved the last episode," or
Mhm.
you guys should do this," or people who have reached out over social media, and followed us along and on the random places, um, that not just validation that you like the show and that you
Mhm.
listen, but also that you want to be a part of it. You want to share, you want to ask questions.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate validation, because
Mhm.
it's like those are the people that we will want to reach, is people
Mhm.
that like this stuff as much as we do,
Mhm.
that ask the questions that maybe we share, but also that we want to think about and answer.
Mhm.
So, beyond listening numbers is just sort of knowing that you all are out there. And yeah, it's just cool. I mean, it's something I don't totally have the words for, but
Mhm.
it is, I am very grateful that people have followed along, to the extent that they have over the years. And
Mhm.
that's why I'm going to keep doing it, because I
Yeah.
know that it's, you know,
So
something
just to
fun for
confirm, this
people.
is
And
not the
that's,
end point?
no, this is not the end point. And let's say it's an inflection point.
Okay, great.
Because no, I mean, honestly, because now it's like, especially, when we experiment with the format and things, I
Mhm.
think it's a great reminder that I think what the show is doesn't have to be what the show has been.
Mhm.
And being able to continue to play with it and explore different ways
Mhm.
of doing it, is really exciting. So I hope people will continue to follow us along with whatever we do with it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thank you for being willing to have me be a part of this journey for you. And so, one day maybe I'll have 100 episodes.
I hope so. That would be great.
That would be a lot more for you.
That's okay.
um,
That's okay with me. I'm here every week or every other week for as long as there are fun things to talk about.
Excellent.
I'm locked in. This is something that I care greatly about,
Mhm.
and you
Well,
know
death, taxes, and
happy to
human
do it.
entertainment, I think, are things that we can
There we
rely
go.
on.
It's
um,
true.
well, congratulations, Ryan, on
Yeah,
your
thank you.
official 100th episode, although there's actually a lot more than that. But on
Yeah,
the
check the
official
archives for a lot
100.
of goofy stuff I've tried out.
And I know I tricked you into thinking that we would talk about Inside Out today. But after rewatching it last night, just in case we did need to talk about it, we definitely should talk about
Yeah,
it.
like I needed an excuse to watch Inside Out for the 100th
100th
time.
time. That's
No,
so
I was
funny.
grateful for the opportunity, and thank you very much, and thank you everyone, who has ever participated in the show in any way, shape, or form.
Hmm. Yeah.
Family, friends, editors, certainly Mike,
Yeah.
and you, Haley, as well.
Thank you.
I wouldn't still be doing it if all of you hadn't been kind of here along the way. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yay. Well,
yay.
give us a follow. Send us your thoughts about the reflections or ideas that you have for how you would like us to move forward. Please rate, review, and subscribe. That's super helpful. And follow us at Pop Psych 101. Okay, now you should do my part because I did your part.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.